Hi, I'm Gail Carriger. How did I get here?
Hey Rockstars, it's Amara. And today I happened to find somebody that I sometimes see on Twitter and I once long ago saw at a steampunk convention.
Hi, I'm Gail Carriger. I write comedies and manners. Some of them are steampunk, most of them are super queer. That's it. There it is.
Super awesome stuff. And she is, in addition to that, like everything else. One of your books became like a manga at one point.
Yes, I have a manga adaptation. Yeah.
You run a website and a mailing list.
I do.
I have a series of kind of strange questions, as is the way I am.
All right, I'm ready.
Convention culture. You go to a lot of conventions.
A lot of them.
I also go to a lot of conventions. Yes. So
I was the steampunk convention ever.
Exactly. The first SteamCon I ever went to is where I got the idea that I could be writing. Kind of it solidified for me because Sherry Priest was there and she was talking about how like she had all these little bits of paper she always wrote on. And I had thought forever this was like an affliction of mine. And it turns out, no, it's a trait of writers.
Middle of the night,
right?
like post-it notes all over the place.
I was really delighted to find out that that's pretty normal. And then I want to say the next year, was it the second or the third one that you were at?
Third one, I think.
And I definitely went, this is somebody I want to talk to again in the future. So it's really kind of great. How many conventions do you think you go to in a year?
Well, I do 12 events a year, and sometimes that's like what I did just this evening, which is just a signing at a bookstore, and sometimes it used to be a book tour, which is like 10 cities in 10 days, but I would say like that's one event, and sometimes it's a big convention like a Comic-Con, and sometimes it's a small convention, like a steampunk event or a small sci-fi con. I also try and mix them up, so I try to do a bunch of different kinds of events.
And that really makes sense to me because one of the things I think always stands out whenever I've seen you, online and in person, is that you have a very unique relationship with your community. Which I think is really important to like not just success in like books, but also in having like a profession you continue to love.
Yes.
Because like 50% of the times when I see you talk, it's about bookish things, and 50% of the time it's about your book specifically.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool that you provide that discussion space.
Yeah, well, I get a lot of people are always asking me to like recommend books. I have a very specific voice, which is kind of breezy and light, but also it's manners and comedies of manners, basically. And a lot of geeks are kind of hungry for like lighter, funner, fluffier sorts of books, which just like there aren't a lot of them out there, and so they're often asking me to recommend other books. That's kind of also what I read, other queer books, other interesting stuff, and so I'm always like delving out, and so I have things to recommend, and I'm happy to talk about them.
You read 600 romance books in a year?
I did in a year.
Oh my gosh.
We don't talk about that.
That's a lot. That's a lot of reading,
but
period.
I am a skim reader, especially with romance. Like I read really quickly. So I don't retain very much of those books.
Fair.
But that is like, some people like have neuroses and depression, and I like just have to live with a happy ending for over and over and over and over.
That's fair.
And then I'll come out the other side.
How do you feel about people writing in books? Because this is a real touchy place for bookish people.
Like
notes, like notations.
This girl, academic, eviscerates her books.
Thank you.
Dog ears.
Whenever I get someone who tells me it's okay that I feel the need to like multicolored highlighting and like side
books
notes
in bathtubs.
Okay.
Same. People cry when they see my books, and the more abused the book, the more affection I have for it.
Right. I kind of have this dream that like I'm gonna bring like a book to like an author, and it's gonna have all these like notations and stuff, and they're gonna be thrilled and like
I'm
a
super
better
excited
sense
about
of like, oh, you actually took time to really like dig in.
When I see like a really dog-eared, really sad-looking book, I'm like, that means the book is well loved.
It's been loved. Yeah. Exactly.
Books are meant to be read.
I
mean, I get like treasuring a beautiful book as a work of art if it's an amazing cover and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's also because I'm a voracious reader. Like, I don't have time to be respectful to the book. I gotta get through it.
And I also think maybe that has to do with the fact that you're someone who obviously has a great passion and support of history, but in a like now way.
Yeah, and I think it's an archaeological thing. Like, I mean, so I'm an archaeologist by training, and there's a reverence for artifact, but then it goes like all the way through to the other side, where you're like, yeah, I've handled stuff that's like 10,000 years old, right? Like, this book is a book, right? I can go buy another one.
My minor is in, well, it was international studies with a focus on Asian cultures, and then they changed to a different school, and they were like, history, and I was like, okay. Yeah, sure, let's go with that. I distinctly remember an article about how in China somewhere they were repainting like a really old artifact, and Americans kept coming in and being like, don't paint this, it's old. And they were like, we still use it. And I always think about that as like a really good, interesting difference of opinion and like difference of perspective based on like times and things like that. So
well, I mean, one of my favorite things is there are things that archaeologists know, and then the internet will like discover it, and I'm like, And one of them is the marble statues, the ancient Greek marble statues, which are all painted. Like, and we all know, so they were like very garish. Like it wasn't marble, it was covered in paint and pigment because they were painted to be in bright colored togas and with hair, like, you know, the whole thing. But archaeologists are like, yeah, we've seen the pigment samples on the statues for years. Like, we all knew they were painted, but.
I often joke about how I was in school for so long and I have so many different things I studied that the one thing I never took a class in was archaeology. So I'm kind of delighted that we've also decided to like friendship a little bit here. You know, when you don't specialize in something, the best thing you can do is find somebody who does that you can have those conversations with. So no, it's fair because one of the things I used to tell my students all the time is like, you know, the social science, archaeology is the science part of social science. Like those, we do statistics. Like, get ready. You see the little freshman eyes go, ah, wait, I just needed that social science credit. I was like, that's what history is. Go learn about the Romans. I think often people feel like they need a permission to start writing this. Permissions are a big thing, I think, with a lot of different things.
I give you all permission to write. How's that?
That's fantastic. I definitely had to like walk around and go, do I get to be a person who writes? Is writing something I can do?
I will say I occasionally wake up or look in the mirror or stand in front of a crowd of people and I'm like, how did I get here?
Like, sure.
I'm going to Seattle to stand in front of 150 people or however many more people and just talk about the books like the weird shit that comes out of my head. Sorry for swearing. No, I'm swearing. It's fine. So I will say that does startle me. Like how did I end up, this is my profession is really amazing. And like I every time I have that moment of startlement, I feel just so lucky and so grateful. I don't suffer from the other side of that, the imposter syndrome side or anything. And I don't know why. I think it's just not in my personality.
Yeah. You obviously are someone who has like literally unearthed solutions to things. Maybe you just unearthed them for yourself also. Maybe I'm just like arrogant enough to be like, what I have is something different to present to the world. I would go talented, but I guess maybe.
I don't know. I like to own it because I feel like women aren't often allowed to be arrogant. You know, it's something that's sort of weirdly admired in men. Yeah, I was lucky, and my success as a writer is serendipity, like the right book at the right time. But I was also prepared to like really work hard to capitalize on it once it happened.
Right.
And I'm proud of that. You guys get to be too.
I'm inspired by that, so I think
when you finish, like finishing a book alone is just an enormous achievement. If you manage to do that, like so few people have managed to do, like, and you should be proud of that. Like if you finished a book, be proud of that. So yeah. If you sent it out into the world or tried to publish it or tried to get it published or self-published it, you should be proud of that too because so many authors are scared to do that.
Many of you are sitting like on manuscripts and you're like, I don't know, just do it.
Do something with it.
Like you will feel better, you try. That is like a thing in general.
The worst that happens is they say no, and like right now you're saying no to yourself.
Right. So it's fascinating you said that to me. My mother recently said something to me about grit and grace. We're a little bit Southern, so I liked that idea, that like juxtaposition, that you can be someone who has grace and also be someone who has like hard hustle. We call it on my channel, we call it the hustle with heart.
I love it.
Like it's a genuine, like I'm a hard worker and yes, there's things I want out of this, but like also I care. I genuinely care.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good balance, and I think especially for women to kind of like say yes, that's something I care about and that's something I step up to.
My partner and I were talking recently about the difference between ambition and drive. I don't think of myself as particularly ambitious because I'm not exactly goal-oriented, but I do think of myself as driven. Like I do feel sort of compelled to write the thing because I can and to put it out there because I can. I don't put it out there necessarily because I want like 100 reviews or because I want to come to Seattle and stand at a bookstore. I feel like that's kind of the difference between ambition and drive. Ambition is almost like you want to do it because of the credit and the recognition, and drive is because you want to do it so you have something to prove to yourself. Part of the way I maintain my sanity as an author, because you're going to get beat down all the time, you're going to get bad reviews all the time, you know, once you put yourself out, you're putting yourself out there, and that means that people are like, oh, it's okay for them to dislike you, and it's okay for them to dislike what you've written because what you write is not for everybody. I stay confident in myself because I'm driven.
People talk about that a lot with like YouTube and like negative commenters and things like that. If you can really take it in, you're like, well, I'm busy creating things.
Yeah.
I don't really have time to be spending my time sending out bad vibes. The relationship I start to have there is to feel sad for these people that you got that space,
so
right?
Sad for them.
Because I ain't got time for that.
Yeah, exactly. And all they really want is some kind of attention. Right. And I'm just like, yeah, you're not going to get it.
I got to sit through this wonderful talk. I mean, honestly, it was a little bit like sitting through a nice TED Talk because you're so good at interacting with people and so good at valuing like the feedback that you get and like riffing off of it. Not to mention, and I hope that this is a comfortable concept, it's obvious to me as someone who identifies as pretty geeky and like in the nerdy space that you speak that world too.
Super geek.
Which I think is probably something to consider if you're going to be bookish in general.
One of the reasons I do conventions and I'm good at conventions is because I grew up in conventions. Right, I went to my first con when I was like 16, and I used to cosplay, you know, Marvel villains in particular, you know, like total geek. Yeah, I speak the language. I also will step up to the plate and be like, that's not one of my geekdoms. Like, when people talk to me about RPG or something, and I'm like, never role played, like not my thing. Sorry.
I often think about how like sometimes I know the lexicon even though I don't participate in the culture.
What that does is it tells the people who like might be geeky about a thing you're not geeky about. It tells them that like I understand you and I value you.
Right.
But like I can't participate in that particular language.
No, totally. In fact,
let's talk about Doctor Who.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's kind of how I ended up at steampunk. I was going to steampunk conventions with somebody. I didn't really understand it. Then I found the niche of writers and was like, oh, writing something I always seem to be doing off to the side. Next thing I know, I'm at every SteamCon taking like copious notes.
So inspiring.
It is so inspiring.
At the heyday of the steampunk convention, it was the whimsy of like people's creativity that always.
I mean, it's everything you want when you're somebody who loves like history and somebody who loves like tech and what's future, because
and
literally
and creative energy.
Oh yeah,
it's wonderful to see imagination stretch through like from costume to technology to like knitting to written word, and to music.
So you produce a lot of content. Now it's books, which I find astounding because your website lists not only all of her books with like nice like places to learn more about them, whether or not this is a series for you, but there is actually a blog post about like how to get started reading your books.
Yeah, because I get the question so much. Because there's so many books that people like are overwhelmed.
Amazing.
And I'm like, okay, here's where you,
Because you have so many blog posts too. And by the way, I'm newly gonna like subscribe and be addicted to your blog posts because I was like, this is just like really good information about like driven women, interesting writer questions. I was like, this is great.
So someone will ask me a question like a number of times on like Tumblr or Twitter or something, and eventually I'll just be like, I'll just do a blog post about this, and then I have something in my back pocket that I can just say, oh, actually I answered that question in depth, because sometimes people want a short answer, but there just isn't a short answer to that question, you know, and I want to do it credit. This came up recently. What kind of writers sort of influence you as a writer, you know, when you're at an impressionable age, as you know, like in your early teens or whatever? Like I get that question a lot, and I'm like, well, I could give you some names, or I could talk a little bit about like each one and why, and what specifically they gave to me as an author and why I value them. And I feel like it's more important to do that because I want to give them credit. I want to give those authors who are like my progenitors, I want to give them credit as well. So early on in my career, I blogged like 3 times a week really faithfully, and I'm not as faithful now as I used to be. But I do like have all this content that I've generated, and people are always coming and discovering my books for the first time, and so I will like go back and like amalgam everything.
So since you have this like, here is the order you should read my books in, you have a couple of blog posts in particular. If people were like, they wanted to put like a foot in, they're like, I'd like to dabble in learning more about you, some of your favorite blog posts that you've made or ones that stand out to you.
Ooh, that's really hard. I mean, because my brain is always in what I'm currently doing, and actually currently my super fan base is doing a big reread of all of the books in this one universe. Yeah, my fan group was talking about doing this, and I was like, all right, I'll structure it for you. So like, it's like you get a week to read each novella, you get 2 weeks to read each novel, and by middle of the year we'll be done with all of them, and that's when the last book in my current series comes out. And so like that's the idea, is everybody wanted to be, but it allows them all to sort of know that we're all talking about X book right now. So sharing like theories.
How fun for you too, because you got this new book that's going to be coming out, right? And it's part of like a legacy of things you love. And you also get to be like right in the middle of hype about. That's a fantastic idea.
It's really fun, and it was totally spontaneous. And it's really fun because also like some of these books are ones I haven't gone back and reread in years, and people are picking up on things. Or a lot of them, it's a reread for them. I write with this sort of layering style where like every time, after a new book comes out, if you go back and reread a previous book, you should learn more. Like that's hopefully that's how it's structured. And so it's really fun for me to watch them be like, oh my god, I never noticed that character was actually this other character, because like 8 books separate those 2 books, you know. And it should be something that like only the super fans would notice and really get excited about, and the book stands on its own without that as well, but it's just like an extra little present. You have a podcast. I do. Oh, I have a podcast. podcast. If you're an audio person, it is like nothing to do with writing. Very bad branding of me. But it's all about travel, actually, because I am also a frequent traveler, and because I'm like a little bit OCD and super into like hacking and travel tips and tricks and stuff, I do a 20-minute podcast with a friend of mine. And it's good if you're a frequent traveler or if you're like planning your first trip somewhere. We have all the necessary tips. Like,
it's fantastic. And as you guys know, I travel a fair amount. I listen to it and I'm like taking notes. And I loved the first episode. They talked a little bit about like Hellmouth airports. And I was like, yeah, I feel this.
What's yours?
Frankfurt.
Oh, Frankfurt's a brutal airport.
Yeah, because I always get stuck there, and it's a big like U shape. I always tend to find myself running back and forth. The last time I finally get to the gate, I'm really worried I'm not going to get to Japan on time, which is what's going to happen if I don't do this right. And I get there, and the gal looks at me, and you know, I've run the airport like 3 times, so I'm like dripping and gross, and she looks at me and she goes, "It's fine," and I'm like,
Honest to goodness, Berlin's not that great either. So, but the two of them,
love the cities. Great times in both those places, but
everyone's got one. Everyone's got a Hellmouth airport. But
the minute I was like, oh, it's Frankfurt, like for me.
See,
so yeah, everybody's.
Mine happens to be Denver, in case anybody's interested.
I've never been to the Denver airport.
I love Denver. Denver's a great city, but it wants to keep me. That airport wants to keep me forever and never let me go. So I've gotten to the point where I'm like, please don't help me through Denver. I just don't want to go to Denver.
Some other direction. Right. Well, I hope your trip back home should not route you through Denver.
No,
unless something goes.
Yes. Okay. The podcast is called 20-Minute Delay. 20-minute delay.
Pretty short podcast, really easy to get through, and I travel all the time, and I took tips from it. So check it out. It'll be linked in the comments below, as will Gail's YouTube channel.
Yes,
I found.
Yeah, who knew?
It has cat videos.
It does. It is occasional cat videos, and then like just Q&As. That channel really is for my readers. So
this is a fair.
I'm a great believer in training your cat. So. I have pictures of my cat being trained. Videos.
I'm looking forward to learning more about this because Mika could use some help. She's just a little bit chaos.
Oh dear.
But yeah, she's new. She's a baby. Oh. Anyway, thanks for sticking with us, Rockstars. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you for having me.
You guys have a good rest of the day. Bye. Internet magic. Go seek it out, yo. Her website is amazing, by the way. You mentioned you used to have a live journal.
I used to have a live journal.
And I was like, this is kind of like, it reads a little bit like the best of live journal. Do your people have a title?
The fan group is called the Parasol Protectorate after the first series. And there's like a code name, and you can like get your code name.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it's serious.
Individualized code names is
yes.
cool.
My newsletter, there's a process where you can sign up for the newsletter under your code name if you want to. Very cool. And then the newsletter will come addressed to your code name.
I get that.
But also the code names are ridiculous because that's my sense of humor. So it's like the most frivolous piece of clothing you own plus your favorite dessert or something, right? And then you like put those two together, and that's your code name.
It's like a tailored BuzzFeed quiz, but like in a specific direction.
There are definitely certain blog posts that I pull constantly.
Okay.
That I find people asking me about a lot. And like originally it was like explaining steampunk, especially from a literary perspective. I have a really good one if you're a writer. I have a really good one on like resources for writing alternate Victorian history and stuff.
That'd be great.
So it's just like both online, but also like here are my favorite primaries and here are my favorite secondary sources. And some of those are open source. Only speaking, if you Google like Gail Carriger Victorian resources, it'll pop
right there.
Yeah.
She's got it already like search engine optimized. It's ready to go. I hear that.
Well, if you're around as long as I've been, like you kind of own your SEO without meaning to.
I often joke about how like I hated being Amara when I was a kid because I always felt like, why can't my name be something more common or like something people like run into more? But my mother, so forward thinking, she did not know the internet was going to happen, and it's much easier to find a website with Amara tagged to it than say Sarah. So it works out.
So true.
Since you mentioned cemeteries, just hear me out, guys. You mentioned cemeteries. Did you know we have a big Victorian cemetery here? Have you been in there?
I have. It's really awesome.
It's really lovely.
Yeah.
If you're ever here in the spring, most of the trees are cherry blossom trees, and it is like the secret cherry blossom field of Seattle that nobody knows about.
Do a photo shoot there.
Fantastic. You do that. Let me know. We'll come out.
Yeah, I love old cemeteries. I like to joke I'm like the pink side of goth because like I was always too cheerful and too into color to like really commit to being a goth.
Right.
Secretly probably a goth.
Okay. Like on the inside. On the inside.
Yeah, secretly.
That's fair. When I was younger, I used to tell people like I feel like instead of blood, my veins are full of glitter. So I feel like that's executed out onto the internet a fair amount. So there's that.